Greetings from the capital, um, Washington D.C. And yes, we have come to the final round of the 45th FIDE Chess Olympiad Budapest 2024. And this is actually the last recap for the Nigerian games because I intend to do many more videos on several games from the Olympiad. And there's going to definitely be videos from the male team, the Indian that won the whole thing. There's going to be videos from the American team, the Uzbekistan team. There several video of very interesting games that was played in this Olympiad. So that being said, we want to check out the last game, the last match the Nigerian team played at Budapest before they left for Nigeria. And Nigeria played against Aruba. It was Aruba versus Nigeria in the 11th round, and Nigeria did the needful. We won this match by a score of 3.5 half. You guys and ladies have done an excellent job, despite the fact playing without playing without a complete team. Holding your own against the very best in the world. I really give you all kudos and great job. So let us get right into this game. The first game, of course, we're going to check out is the game that was played on the first board. This is between Juan Pablo and FIDE master Kiki Abumo. These both of them are FIDE masters. So the game started with the move e4, d5. It takes d5, it takes d5. In this tournament, I think Bomo has played the Alekhine defense at some point. Now he's playing Scandinavian. We know that he plays Scandinavian, and of course, he plays Estonian sometimes. So, like I said, it's very interesting that Bomo is really mixing all these things up. So, queen takes d5, we have the Scandinavian defense. Queen a5, these are all the main lines. c4, knight f6, bishop c4, bishop to g4, f3. F3 is played, bishop back to d7, knight g to e2, d4, immediately striking out the pawn in the center, captures, queen captures, queen to d4. Wow. To me, I think white is just like, you know what, let's get to the end game. I'm proud. I mean, I'm okay with my end game. Another thing I think reason why white played the move like that was probably he wants to try to use the lead he has in development. But I'm not sure if this lead can really amount to much. I'm not sure, But queen d4, e6 is played, bishop e3. Yeah, I would have done the same thing. Captures back, a6. What's the idea of a6? Stopping any infiltration through the b5 square. We don't want that. And of course, b5 is a possibility. So bishop to b3, bishop to c6. White castles long, knight b7. Very interesting position. Interesting in the sense that all the minor pieces for white is already developed. Black need maybe one more move to get all the pieces in the game. I think I like bishop to b4. Maybe, yeah, bishop to b4 is possible. Bishop to e7 is possible. It looks like a very boring position, very dry position. I don't think nothing much can come out of this from either side, unless somebody really wants to try to compromise their own position. But let's keep going. Bishop to e3, bishop to b4. And I think the idea of bishop to e3, vacating the d4 square for the knight to put pressure on the bishop on c6. In a position like this, if you can get rid of one of the bishops, then you can have something to play for. As long as we have the two bishops on the board well placed, it's going to be hard for any of them to create some kind of play. So after the move bishop to b4, I expect the move a3. Bishop goes back to a5, maintaining the pin. And then we have king to b1. What's the point of king to b1? I'm not sure. I don't know why. I don't know why there's nothing to be worried about on this diagonal. So I'm not sure why king went to b1. Rook to c8. Rook to e1. H rook to e1. Interesting move. Why? Because normally you're always told to get out from a pin. But this is White voluntarily putting himself in a pin. Why? I have no clue. Castle's long, castle short, bishop to d2. Now I think White is trying to move the knight to either d5. If bishop captures on d2, I have knight check. Actually, like knight e7 check, and I'm going to tell you why. Once the king moves, I capture the bishop. Now I have a chance of taking this rook or the bishop. It's probably going to move the rook to c7. Knight takes the bishop, and now I have a bishop knight against a knight knight. Just trying to look for any kind of way to get some kind of advantage. If you're trying to win the game, you have to try to unbalance the position somehow. You have to create some kind of unbalance. So bishop to d2 is played. Bishop b6 immediately. Black responds to that move, moves away from the pin. So knight f1. At this point is just time for the players to shuffle their pieces. And I talk about this a lot. You pretty much look for squares to put your pieces, either to create a weakness or to exploit a weakness. And if your opponent is doing the same thing as you, you might just not have a whole lot to do. So that's why in a game of chess, sometimes you want to play your opponent as quick as possible, probably through an opening preparation or a middle game preparation or something like that. But let's keep going. Rook f to d8, centralizing the rook. Looking at black position looks really good. The bishop's looking at the king side, nothing to worry about. The knights are well placed, the rooks are well placed, all the pieces are well placed. Um, the white piece is also looking good. The knight on this one's got to get in the game to try to do something as quick as possible. But the position looking very, very boring. Let's keep knight d3 is played. Knight to c5. Knight captures back. Bishop to g5. Yes, I expected that more. Bishop to g5, creating a pin on the rook on d8. Like I said, in positions like this, you also want to try to look for a way to balance the position to try and have some opportunity of playing for a win. So bishop d6 was played here. Now this is the first bad move in this game by either white or black. This is like the first move that's really like, okay, you know what, this is just a very bad idea. And what is the point of this move? Is it because white is just trying to snatch a pawn on h2? Is it because the rook and the rook is putting pressure on bishop? But there's nothing to worry about because we have the bishop defend, we have the rook defending it. So why exactly is this bad? Now, while I was going through this, I thought about a move here. And the move I thought about was rook takes e6. If it takes back, I'm going to take this check. If it moves, I'm going to take the rook. If it takes, then I'm going to take the bishop. And all of a sudden, white has an advantage. See how an innocent move can just change things. Now, why did I think about rook e6? Actually, I was thinking about this earlier because think about it. The bishop, the light square bishop, with a king on the light square, with a rook on the light square, with pawns on the light square. Those are kind of red flag. There's a possibility. At the worst case scenario, after rook takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, check, the king or bishop takes, you have 2 pawns up, 2 pawns for a piece. You have 2 pawns for a piece. But because the rook bishop on d6 is protected by the rook, now everything changes. What do I mean by that? After rook takes e6, f takes e6, bishop takes e6 check, the king has to move. We have bishop takes c8. If the rook captures, we have rook takes d6, and white is just winning. White is just winning. Very innocent bishop d6. And that was exactly what white did. Rook takes e6, bishop takes h2. Black said, well, I wasn't really trying to, I was just trying to get a pawn. So, but then it's still advantage for white. So after the move, bishop takes. I don't know about that move. What would I have done here? What would I have done here? Probably take check. The rook takes. I can move the rook here, putting pressure on that square. If rook comes to f8, I can take. And then all of a sudden, position is kind of unbalanced. White has something to play for. He has a good pawn setup. Black cannot say about the same thing. Okay, so let's keep going. Bishop takes f6, rook takes d1, knight takes d1, um, g takes f6, rook takes f6. All of a sudden, white is likely up because he has a pawn up, and black has this compromised um, pawn structure. Weak pawn on f7, weak pawn on h7. Rook to c7, defending the pawn on f7. Knight to e3. What's the threat? Knight g4 is possible. Knight f5 is possible. Knight d5 is possible. A lot of possibilities here. So king to g7, rook f5, king to g6, g4. You know, it's always very important to be careful to not to make moves like this. I'm not saying it's bad face value, but I'm just saying you always want to wait such moves before you make them. Although it kind of makes sense because then with the rook on f5, you can switch the rook to h5, bring the knight to f5, and then yeah, not a bad idea. g4, rook to e7, attacking the knight on e3, knight goes to d5. Now this move is losing for black. This move is losing for black. Wow. This move is losing for black. Why is this move losing for black? Okay, the first thing that comes to my mind is if I can capture this bishop with the knight to b4, I'm going to mess this pawn structure because even after knight b4, he cannot play rook here because if knight captures, rook cannot capture because there's bishop takes pawn check, which is just winning. And what else do I have here? You know, like I said earlier, it just calls for one bad move to create a lot of unbalance, and then everything just goes crazy. So let us see. Rook to d7 was played. White makes a mistake immediately. You know, one thing I always say is when there's a piece that doesn't have a lot of squares to move to, it could be a weakness. What do I mean by that? After knight b4, bishop doesn't have a lot of squares. You don't have the d5 square, you don't have e4, you don't have f3. If you come to b5, I'm going to kick you, and then you don't have that square, you don't have this square, you have this square and this square, and then you're pretty much forcing this bishop away from very active squares. So instead of the move c4, knight b4 would have been very nasty for black. So c4 is played, captures that. Now looking at this position, we can tell ourselves that we can get into a position where we already have a position where we have an opposite colored bishop. Whenever there's an opposite colored bishop, there are certain things we have to know. To get to play for a win in an opposite colored bishop, your bishop must be the active one. That means your bishop must have a possibility of creating some threats on the king or the opponent's position. Because if those two bishops don't really have that luxury, then the game is probably going to fizzle out into a draw. And I'm not surprised this is what happened at this game, but let us see exactly how this game ended. So h4 is played, very important move. Why is it important? When your opponent has a light square bishop, you want your pawns on the dark square so that the bishop cannot attack those pawns. The pawns can only be attacked by either the king or the rook, one of the two. So h6 makes a lot of sense because of moves like rook and bishop here. If the king moves back, rook here is going to be threatening the pawn and the bishop. But now since the pawn is on h6, it's only going to be a threat on the pawn, and the bishop can always come here to defend it. So bishop to c2, king goes back, rook h5, attacks the pawn, protects the pawn, rook f5, bishop goes back to g3, f4. There is really not a lot of things black can do in this position, white can do in this position. Bishop d3, rook to c7, stopping the king from joining, but the king can always join to that square. a4, rook goes back to c8. Now, black has to be very careful here. I think black wants to create a blockade on the d6 square, not the d5. because if your rook is on d5, it's easy for the bishop to force your rook out of that square. So we want to create a blockade on the d6 square because it's a dark square. Just like I said earlier, just put your pawn on the dark square and you're good. Since the bishop can never target those pawns. And that's why in positions like this is where we say, you know what, knights are much better than the bishop. So in this position, rook to c8 was played. Not a good move. Rook to c8, not a good move. And we really have to be careful when we're playing positions. One move can just compromise your position and then things are not looking so good. So king to a2 was played. Rook goes to c8. King to b3. At this point, it's obvious that white is like, you know what, black is like, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. Really, I don't think that's going to work because, I mean, these are blunders. This move means black can just be losing this game. And without black really knowing that moving back and forth is not such a good idea. So let's see what happened. Bishop to c4. Rook back to c7, bishop to d3, rook goes back. Wow. I'm sure if Bomo checks out this game later on and notices that the rook c7, c8, rook c8 especially are just very bad moves, you'll be like, wow, this was really close. So what should be a winning plan for white here? Number one, you have to try to advance this pawn. Can we advance this pawn? Pawn push. Rook attacks, bishop here, rook takes. No, you can just come to d7, defend that. I always know what you're playing for. If you know what you're playing for, you stay with it so that you're not distracted. Let's keep going. Bishop to c4, rook to c7, a5, rook to d7, king a4. And of course, the reason why black is coming here is to try to push this pawn all the way. And of course, it makes a lot of sense going to the light square because you don't want to get on the dark squares because of the opposite dark square bishop. So g f6 is played, b4, rook to e7, b5, rook attacks the pawn twice, so it takes. Now, if you take here, I can attack you and take, and then that's a very good position for white. It simply takes back. So king moves, bishop takes, bishop attacks the rook, rook attacks the bishop, takes the pawn, bishop attacks the rook, bishop moves back, takes the pawn, and very soon this game is going to fizzle to a draw because of all the pawns dropping like ripe apples. It's kind of hard for either side to be able to make anything out of it. So we're going to jump right into the next game. So the game against Juan Pablo ended in a draw. So let's see what happened in Bimbo's game. Abimbola or Shufui. Bimbo had the white pieces, and of course we should expect the move c4. Yes. Oh, he played knight f3. Of course, he could always transpose to c4. Knight f3, knight f6, c4. There we go. What variation is the opponent playing? The opponent is playing the Anglo-Indian defense. And we actually know b6 is associated with the Queen's Indian. Anytime you fianchetto your dark square bishop on the king side, that's the King's Indian. When you fianchetto your light square bishop on the Queen side, that's the Queen's Indian defense. So g3, bishop to b7, bishop to g2, c5, trying to claim as much squares in the central squares, castles, g6. Okay, black is going for a double fianchetto. Black is going for a double fianchetto. Nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Going for a double fianchetto. So that means he's going to always have somewhere to put his pieces. Rook to e1, bishop to g7, knight to c3, d5. Yeah, I was expecting that move to come at some point in time. Because if d5 doesn't come, I know why he's going to play d4. d4, exactly, right away, d4. Now, one thing black has to be worried about is moves like d5. When you're still behind in development, you have to be very careful making active moves because those moves can actually backfire if you're not careful. d4, d5, d4, knight to d7, captures on d5, Knight captures back, e4, knight c3, b takes c3, castles. Now, looking at this position, we could see that all black's pieces. I have to speak louder because they've told me that they can't hear my voice. Let me try to speak louder. Black's pieces are looking very, very okay. They are all developed. The bishops on b7 and g7. Knight needs to come to f6, put pressure on e4. That's all right. White's yet to develop his last minor piece, which is the bishop on c1. The bishop on g2 is looking really good. He has a long diagonal he can work with. The knight on f3 is looking good. He has pressure on the central squares. The bishop on c1 can either come to b2. It can either go to e3. Not right away because the pawn on e4 is hanging. It can go to f4 as well, even g5. But one thing that makes white stance better in this game is the fact that he has a beautiful control over the central squares. He has pretty much controls the four main squares on the board. Yeah, so that's a big deal for white. And this game has already been played before in 2015 between Kazubov and Swayams. Kazubov won this game. So let's keep going. So castles, bishop to b2. So white decides to bring the bishop to the square b2 to add more protection or more pressure on the center squares. So queen to c7, queen b3. Actually, in this position, I would have played rook to c1 because of the queen. I would have played rook to c1. You know, since you already have everything going on in the center, just rook to c1, improve the placement of your pieces. The NG said h4 was a good move. And h4 makes a lot of sense. Why? Because if you can play h5, of course, it's not going to take because it's going to expose the king. If it doesn't take, you can always take, forcing the pawn to capture on f pawn, creating some weakness on that diagonal, or forcing the h pawn to capture, creating the weakness on the h7 square. But let's keep going. Queen to b3 was played instead. Rook a to c8, rook a to c1, queen to b8, rook to d1. Actually, I would have preferred rook to d1 immediately because I really don't see anything happening on c1. But on the other hand, you know, you could always stay there in case, just to discourage black from capturing on center squares. But even if black had captured on d4, that would have actually been good for white because it would have kept white's pawns together. Okay, let's keep going. So the move queen b8, rook d1, queen to a8. That's a long maneuver just to put pressure on the pawn. What if I just push my pawn up once and then shut this bishop out? I mean, I don't know. Knight to d2. And I think the idea of that move is now I want to play d5, disallowing this pawn push because I'm just going to snap it off the board. Yes, I think so. So king moves to h7. Of course, the idea is to play f5. We cannot take on f5 because of the bishop on g2. I always talk about this. Whenever there is an x-ray attack, always think about it. Don't sleep upon it. d5 is played, good move. Oh, the opponent still played the move anyway. So knight takes c4, thank you very much. He plays knight, attacks the two pieces. What do I mean? It's attacking the queen, it's attacking the pawn, but the pawn is not such an issue. So we can simply just move the queen to, can we go to b4? c2, I think c2 is better. You don't want to go to b4. So queen c2 is played. Bishop to a6, putting pressure on knight on d3, or on c4. Knight goes to e3. Bishop to b5. At this point, we can say that black doesn't really know what he is doing. So, because these maneuvers are pretty much played into what white wants to do. After c4, everything just totally changes. The queen is shut out of the game due to this pawn structure. There's a huge tempo on the bishop. The bishop has to go back here or go back here. But there's about to be an exchange of dark square bishop, which is going to compromise the dark squares around the black king's position. So what exactly did black gain with all those maneuvers? Pretty much black just played into white's hand. And to make things worse, black sacrificed a pawn for this maneuver. Let's stop and think for that for 1 minute. Black sacrificed a pawn for all this maneuver. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But let's keep going. Bishop to a4. Bishop takes check. King takes. Queen c3 check. King moves. Rook to d2. The rook is going to come to e2. We're going to push this pawn all the way. We can even make this knight here threatening to just kill this king. I mean, a lot of bad things are going to happen. And then black is going to ask himself after the game, what is the queen doing on a8? What exactly is the queen doing on a8? b5, d6, very strong move. The idea here is, to release this bishop, to keep an eye on this queen, not to release that bishop. Um, and also the d6 square kind of, if the black captures, f6 is really weak. Remember when we exchanged off the dark side bishop, that's what happens. And then we have moves like knight g4, knight f6, knight h6 mate. A lot of bad things are going to happen. And the bishop, the knight, the rook, the queen are doing absolutely nothing. You can't just play yourself into this position and hope to survive. No, not in this game. Captures, knight to g4, threatening knight h6 checkmate. Knight goes back. Wait a minute. Is this what happened in the real game? Oh, he resigned. Oh my God. Okay, that was it. That was easy. That was easy. So going to the next game, we have Torishe was on the black side of the knight f3. She was playing against an 1880 candidate master. Okay, let's see how this game went. Knight f3, d5. Wow, that was an interesting, I don't know. That guy just, you first compromise your queen by hiding your queen in the corner and then give a pawn like, it's my birthday, let me give a pawn, maybe I can get some presents back. But instead of getting presents back, you got the center shut off. And then I really like the d6 maneuver. D6 quickens the f6 square. Remember, we've traded the bishop, the dark square bishop earlier. So that just makes a lot of the dark squares around the king very weak. And it's not surprising that black lost his game on the dark squares. We have to always learn to protect our dark squares. Very important, especially when we don't have a dark square bishop to protect it. So d4 is played, knight f6, c4, c6. We have the Slav. We have the Slav. We have the Slav. Why is this the Slav? Anytime you have the d4, d5, c4, and c6 is played, that's the Slav. If it's the e6 play, that's the Queen's Gambit. e3, a6. I used to play this line. I play this line sometimes. It's called I think it's called the chameleon. Yes, it's called the chameleon. I used to know a lot of theory on this line. Not anymore, but I still know some of it. Maybe not the new theory on this line. Captures on d5, captures back, knight c3, knight c6, bishop d3. Nothing much to talk about here. This is just both players trying to get their pieces on the best squares possible. Bishop to g4, h3, bishop to h5. Wait a minute, bishop to h5. Bishop to h5, castles, e6, a3, bishop to d6. Now, this push is always a possibility. b4, castles, bishop to b2, b5. And now I think white can look to put a piece on the c5 square. Bishop e2, knight d2, knight b3, knight c5, f4. White is not looking bad. But you know what? Black is not going to just watch you, move all your pieces to the best squares possible. Let's see how black responded to that. Rook to c1 first. And in positions like this, it's very important that time is very crucial. Time. I really like this maneuver, but I can't make it happen because there's a pin. And I don't want to play g4. That'd be really crazy. I don't have to play g4 to expose my king just because I want to get a knight to c5. So the most logical thing is to just pull the bishop back to e2. Pull the bishop back to e2, then knight d2, knight b3, then knight c5. So let's keep going. Rook e1. Now think about all these moves. This is very important. Think about this move that White just played, rook e1. How does this move help the position? You can't even play d5 because your d4 is hanging. Think about that position. You can't even play d5. So when you make a move, make sure it's a move that is timely. You need the move now, you know, especially when position can get very critical very quickly. Rook e1, queen b3, queen b6, sorry. Finally, bishop to e2, rook to c7. Now, because of the loss of time, Black is going to double on the c file and then start putting a lot of pressure because after doubling, you know, knight takes, bishop takes, there could be a lot of things happening here. So knight, finally the knight jumped, but I don't know if that's the best jump. Captures, queen captures, but why not just knight? Okay, rook can capture, knight can capture, rook can capture, knight, queen can capture. So queen captures, and I think the reason it used the queen is because if take takes, if bishop takes, there's knight takes, pawn attacking the queen, and then so the bishop can't take. Okay, but let's keep going. Knight takes c6, rook takes, knight a2, knight a2. Let's talk about this position real quickly. Okay, the bishop is not looking good. Bishop is better. If I can get my rook to c4, that would be really bad for black, for white. White hasn't played the game well. That's not the right capture. Take takes. Now, white is saying, you know what, I'm going to go into the ending. You have a bad bishop, I have a better one. I'm not, and black says, and I'm just going to try to outplay you. So pawn push, like d6, captures back. It's important you open up the position, white, to create some play. You always have to find a way to create some play for yourself. Even after all these exchanges, the engine is saying is even. Let us see bishop to c1, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen threatens the queen, and this check winning the piece. What happens? Takes, take. This pawn is always going to be a weakness. And with the center pawn, I don't know what black's plan, what white's plan is, but it still says even. So how did black was able to win this position? King f6 was a bad move. White is winning all of a sudden, but how? Another very bad move. Pawn push, takes back. Just go back and pick the pawn. And then what's the point of that? Okay, not good maneuver. And very soon the game was going to be lost because the bishop is going to always perpetually defend a3. Not a good one. Your bishop is tied, your king is tied. One thing about knights is knight can really go crazy positions like this. So a6 always makes a lot of sense. When you're playing against the bishop with a dark square bishop, put your pawn on the light square. If you're playing with light square bishop, put your pawn on the dark square. A4, h4, h5 makes a lot of sense. Put your pawns on the light square. Takes, king moves, king moves, king moves, king pawn push. What we're going to do is claim the life of the bishop. Yes, this is just winning. There you go. All right. Okay, let's check out the last game. Sorry, I'm rushing this because I'm going to have to get in a meeting shortly. So this is the last game between Quick Pen versus Antonio Jane. Quick Pen rating like 1918, Antonio rating 1763. E4. Oh, Quick Pen has been playing E4 and C4. That's impressive. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6. Nothing much to talk about. This is the Gucco piano, also known as the Italian game. C3, trying to play D4, knight F6, B3, that's the main line. You don't want to play D4. That's kind of the old line. D3, just keeping everything together. So A6, knight BD2, D6, B4, bishop A7, A4. What's the point of this pawn pushes? These pawn pushes are pretty much just to gain some space. That's all. Space is some kind of advantage. Just getting some space. Castles, H6, H3, bishop E6, captures back, Knight c4. What's the idea? Probably going to try to maybe play bishop e3, take, take, maybe try to bring the knight to the king side, try to do something. Knight e7, bishop e3, knight to g6, bishop takes, pawn rook takes, g3, keeping the knight away from the dark squares around the king position. Knight to h7, queen e2, connecting the rooks, just basic stuffs. Knight to g5, I have to take because there's a pressure on h3 and f3, takes back, queen e3, threatening to exchange the queen. I think it's a forced exchange because if you don't, this rook is going to be lost. Takes with the pawn upon the f file. So they both have the f files. So what can be done with the f file? I don't think there's a whole lot that can be done. For me, this position is pretty even. And at some point in time, I think white wants to play a5. a5 is going to be a very good move, stopping this pawn from moving. But I think with best play, I think the game should end in draw. But in chess, there's nothing like yeah, this is played this good, so we can't play a5. In chess, even when you have one position, you still have to make it happen somehow. So let's keep going. Rook takes, king captures back, check, king moves, d4, captures back, one doubles the pawn. Still an even position. Maybe slightly okay for white, but very. And one thing about positions like this is you have to know what to exchange. Now there's a hole here. If you push this is going to become weak. So let's see how white was able to gain some advantage from this. King takes, king move, pawn push, king move, takes, pawn takes. Now we can get a knight to c4 to attack this. If the pawn moves, we can now get the knight from c4 to d4, put pressure on that pawn. And in king pawn endings, the more centralized king, in endings generally, king pawn or whatever, in endings generally, the more centralized king always have an advantage. If your king gets to the center before your opponent's king, even though you have equal number of three pieces, you might have some problems just because the king has um, more routine in the center than your king does. King f6, king d5, king e4, pawn push. I don't like that one because now this makes this pawn free. I can get my knight here and attack that pawn, force it to move, come back and pick it up. So let's see what happens. He actually takes the pawn. I think he must have taken because it felt he can go attack the pawn right away and win the pawn, and nothing black can do about that. Instead of that move, I think knight just wins. This is why it's very important to watch the exchange of pawns. You don't want to just exchange pawns without actually thinking about the consequences of those moves. So here h4 was played. h5, another bad move. King moves. Now this knight is totally tied to defense of that. The king would have to deal with the knight and the king, and I don't think the king is that strong. b5, g6, knight goes back. You don't have to move the knight back. We just move your king, lose a move, put this king in zog somehow. Knight back, all of a sudden the game is even again. So important to watch. So important to watch what we do. Now you're going to give up this pawn for this pawn, but this is a pass pawn. This one can easily be stopped. He says, but no, I'm going to protect mine first. King goes to the other pawn. King moves. Repeating moves here. Pawn push, captures. King moves. Still even. This game must have been decided by a blunder. Takes. Check. Pawn push. Check. Still even because I can always sack my pawn for this. King gets exchange this for this and it's still a draw. But how did this game end up in black's white advantage? Let us see. Okay. Now the king is cut off. There's one thing we call shouldering in endgames. That's when you actually stop the opponent's king from approaching your king. And I think this king is doing so very well against this king. So the knight against this 3 is not going to be able to survive. So the king is pretty much just going to walk in here, walk in there, and then capture this knight, maybe this pawn. Definitely has to keep this pawn for some winning chances. So after a few more moves, it was time for black to pull in the tower. The idea is to exchange off this knight. Yep. Attack with knight. Attack again. Check. Check. Pawn push. And the game is pretty much over after that. Gets the queen. And this is how the game was won by Quick Pen. Big congratulations to the Nigerian team. Um, well played Olympiad. And looking forward to you guys getting back home in one piece. And also looking forward to the next tournament. Thank you for being here through the recap, although we didn't start the recap from game one or game three that Nigerians joined, but we just feel we have to do something for people to check out and give us some feedback. Yes, yeah, there was been complaints about the volume. I'm still working on it really. Like I said, I don't have all my gears with me right now, but at some point in time, I'm going to get everything together. Okay, so that's it for now, and see you all soon. Take care and God bless. Bye.